you pulled the latest code from your Git repository and it's pointing to the right branch. You did that. Now try to unify the build number to be the same on info.plist file and the Android manifest.xml files. And it should be greater than the one in the App Store right now. So right now, the one in the App Store is version number 41. So, and a version name 1.4.1, so it's just 42. Now clean all the temp files by quitting Visual Studio. Quit Visual Studio. And then delete the folders. So what you can do is you can just open the folder in terminal. Open some new terminal at folder. So it basically opened the terminal, and now you can do that git clean-fxd. Okay, now restore NuGet packages. Okay, and now open Visual Studio again. And let's do Android first. Reload all. As soon as that is done, what we're going to do is we're going to switch the configuration to release. Right now it's set to debug, so we'll switch to release. And then we will test it on the emulator. In the meantime, let me try to log in to my Android developer console. Android console. So since I already have an account, it just shows me the apps that are out there. Oh yeah, I've noticed that there's an issue with Firefox and the Android developer console, so I'm just going to close that. Let me try to see if it works with Safari. Alright, come on. So yeah, so since I am already logged in to my developer console, essentially as soon as you go to the console, you see a bunch of your apps. Today we're going to go over this app. I've been working on it just for a few months. It's been on the App Store for some years, and we have a lot of fixes for this app. And you know, it shows you some information about it. You know, number of users lost, users acquired. Obviously, it's more than the number of users acquired. A ton of crashes. Hopefully, we can fix those crashes with this release. You have to go to the release management, into your app releases. So you just click on app releases, and you can start with internal test track. I recommend it because it also, uploading to the internal test track automatically launches some UI tests from Google itself for free, and so you get information in your pre-launch report. So you can, give you some basic information about warnings and issues, some performance issues that it identifies for each of your releases that you upload. And so, it'll sometimes even show you pictures and things like that. Yeah, and so it gives you like really useful information that you can use. Okay, perfect. So it's done. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to the release configuration. In my particular case, I have it set over there. Yeah. And then I will make sure, opening Droid, the options for Droid, and I'll make sure that it is set for some basic configuration settings. When you go to linker, it makes sense to link SDK assemblies so that it reduces the size of your APK file. Go to advanced. This is important. You have to make sure that it supports the right ABIs. So for now, it supports x86_64 only so that I can test it on my emulator, because my emulator requires x86_64. But devices out in public do not have x86_64 processors anymore. So you don't really have to support that ABI. So let's just cancel it for now since we didn't really make any changes. And let's just hit play so that I can test and make sure that it works with a release user name and password. And again, we wait for a while for this to finish. In the meantime, I'm going to look for my password and username that I can use for testing in production. As soon as it's done, technically it's going to open the app in this emulator. Okay, still waiting. So essentially what we're doing right now is we're building an APK file for the Android emulator. And so once it's finished building, it just installs that APK file. You can click on this button here and it'll give you details of what's going on. So you can see stuff. So it's done building the view model project. Okay, perfect. It's deploying. It's going very slowly because I'm recording the video. And now we're going to test it before we push it to production. So as soon as it launches, we put in the username and password and make sure that it actually logs in, make sure that there's no debug information that we're collecting. So now that it logged in, I'm essentially made sure that it works. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to archive this for publishing. So I made sure that the build number was greater, and now I right-click on the Droid project in Visual Studio. And I say archive for publishing. And so it essentially is making an archive, and it just did. So it'll give you some information, and now I'll sign and distribute. So I'll save it to disk for now. And then I'll choose the Keystore file. So if the app does not have its own Keystore file, you go ahead and create a new key, but since it has one, so I just select it and say next, and just publish. If it was not imported, I would just import it. Click on that import button if there was none in the list, and select the Keystore files. I'm just going to save this on the desktop and put in the password. So the password that we put in for our Keystore file. And as soon as it's done, I just, reveal in Finder and publish succeeded. So this archive, we can essentially just put it on Google Drive, and people can install it from Google Drive, but we actually want to publish it onto the App Store. So we're going to go to the App Store, and like I mentioned, I'm going to go down to internal testing, manage internal testing, and I'm going to go to the top. I say create a release. I'm going to put in browse file, and go to my desktop and upload my APK file. So I will scroll to the right and see which one is bigger in size. Since they're both the same size, I'll just choose my signed APK file. Say choose. As soon as it uploads, I'll scroll down and it'll ask me what is my release name. So I'm going to put in a release name, scroll, and I'll say 1.4.2 prod. 4.2 space prod, or hyphen prod, same thing, yeah. And I'll go to the top to see. Okay, cool, so it succeeded. And now I'm going to look at the file size. So scroll, and it says file size is 31 MB, which is not bad. It supports 3 native platforms. I just need it to support 2 native platforms, so 3 doesn't, it's not bad. And now I'll scroll down. It asked me what's new in this release, so I'm just going to copy what was in my previous release since that wasn't really published. But usually you'll get this from your product or your BA, and I'll scroll down to see it has English and French because I have 2 languages for this app. So save, then review. And I'll say supported device comparison. I'll just click on it. Make sure there's no red flags. It supports 7,100 Android devices. Start rollout to internal test. Yeah. And now at the same time, I will roll it out to alpha, and then I'll roll it out to beta. I'll just take a look over here. It mentions 3 native platforms. So this one's usually just emulators. This is the older Android devices, and then the 64-bit processors are the newer Android devices that have the ARM processor. So those are just the main 2 things that you have to support. And now I'm going to release to alpha. And I'm going to say add from library, since it's already added. I'm just going to choose, where's today's? What is today's date? It's the 28th of January. Where did it go, actually? Oh yeah, it's already there. Okay, it's already selected. Scroll down and make sure the release name is the same. The release notes are good. So review. And the same thing. It gives me a warning message, so I'm just going to click on the warning message to read what it says. It says unoptimized APK. It says that I can essentially reduce the size of my APK file. Since I don't need to, it's only 30 megabytes and product doesn't need me to reduce the size of the APK file, I'm just going to ignore this message. It's only a warning, it's not an error message. And then the other says deactivation of the old APK, means that you cannot use the old APK anymore. You can only use a new APK. So if there's any changes that you made over there, you can't see them anymore. So then I start rollout to alpha. Alpha is basically internal testing. And now I'm going to release it to beta testing. So scroll to the top. And I'm going to release it to beta. I'm not going to release it to production yet. And I will explain why. This is meant for production. So this one, as it mentions, version 42, that's the one that is going to be activated, and the older version is going to be deactivated. So this is correct. That's the right release notes that people are going to see in the App Store. The French users are only going to be able to see the French release notes. English users are going to see the English release notes. So this is good. Rollout to beta. Beta is for external testing. So users, when they go to the App Store, they're actually going to be able to sign up for the beta version of apps. And so essentially, users who have signed up are going to be able to use it. Finally, I have to release it to production. I am not going to release it to production right now, but I'm just going to show you how to do it because I'm going to test it before I actually push into production. I'm going to test it once more because sometimes there are crashes that happen in beta that don't happen in while I was testing. So it's always good to test as many times as you can, and I think it's a smart idea to test at that time. So notice how it says target SDK 28, target SDK 27. So you can target SDK 27, but in a few months, Android will say, hey, you need to target SDK 28. It's basically the version number of Android. They try to make sure that you target a newer version. And if you notice over here, there's been a lot of different versions that have come out since the last version that was in production. And so essentially, same thing, same exact thing. I just review. And so, as soon as you, so wait, what is the error message? So it just says the same thing that, you can have a smaller APK size. I'm like, it doesn't really matter for me. So over here, it is also no longer supporting 652 devices and 139 tablets because of the fact that the target SDK has increased from 27 to 28. So a lot of the older devices are not going to be supported anymore, which is fine for now. So you can release it, roll out 100% at a time, or you can roll out, 0.001% at a time. Either one. Or you can say, timed release. But essentially just to show you guys, because, it'll still be 0, I'm going to, just start rollout to production. And you would essentially put it to 100% and you would say start rollout to production, and it would, it would essentially be released for production, and your users will be able to access the app. And that's it. You have completed the Android process. So now we do a similar process for iOS. So in the meantime, I will test it on Android, but we will, go through the process for iOS.